I remember the silence of that hotel room more vividly than the laughter that echoed down the hallway just hours before. They thought they were clever, my siblings, my cousins, even my parents, yes, especially them. They packed up their suitcases while I was out on the balcony, sipping bitter black coffee, staring down at the city lights as if they held secrets. By the time I walked back in, the room was stripped bare of their presence, as if my family had been nothing more than a fleeting dream. Friends, you enjoy listening to stories, but you don't subscribe to the channel or like the videos. I request you to please subscribe to the channel right now so that I get more motivation to bring you even more stories. If you help me reach 1,000 subscribers, I promise to bring you extremely best stories with a truly real feel, so go ahead, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and now let's move on to today's story. But they left me with the bill. The only thing they didn't know, the only thing they had never bothered to ask, was that the bill had already been paid. Paid by me, long before they had even stepped into that hotel. Every dinner we ate, every glass raised in shallow toasts, every night of soft sheets and luxury they wore like second skin, it was all me. But why would they wonder? I was always invisible to them, the daughter too quiet, the sister too plain, the cousin too compliant. Invisible doesn't mean weak. I sat down on the edge of the hotel bed, the crisp white sheets a little too neat, too tucked, as if mocking the chaos that had erupted from my bloodline. I should have cried. That's what the old me would have done, weep into pillows, fold into myself, convince myself I deserved the abandonment. That was the script they had written for me long ago. But instead, I laughed. Low, sharp, a sound that curled out of me like smoke from a fire I hadn't realized was burning for decades. The truth is, my family had been leaving me behind my whole life. When I was 7, my brother got a scholarship to play football and suddenly every conversation at the dinner table bent around him like satellites caught in his orbit. When I was 12, my sister won a beauty pageant and the house was plastered with her beaming smile, congratulatory banners draped like shrines. No one remembered that I had placed first in a statewide essay competition that same year. My prize was a certificate folded into a drawer. My sister's crown sat in the center of the living room for years. Neglect doesn't always come in slaps or curses. Sometimes it comes in silences, in the way I skim over you, in the way no one bothers to ask if you're okay. And now here I was, 34 years old, sitting in a hotel in Chicago that I had paid for, realizing they had tried one last time to write me out of their story. Only, the story wasn't theirs to control anymore. I checked my phone. Group chats were silent. My bank notifications were not. Because while they thought they had escaped leaving me behind, they didn't realize that every single credit card was in my name. Every extravagant steakhouse bill, every champagne brunch, every designer purchase they made while giggling and grinning down Michigan Avenue, it was all mine to own. Or rather, theirs to regret. They didn't just abandon me. They handed me the strings. And for the first time in my life, I felt the weight of power sitting comfortably in my palm. I didn't leave the hotel immediately. Instead, I stayed. Not because I was waiting for them to realize what they had done, God knows they wouldn't. No, I stayed because I wanted to savor this moment, the silence of their absence, and the realization that after all these years of being overlooked, I finally had something they couldn't steal from me, control. While they sped off in rented cars or hopped on last-minute flights thinking they had bested me, I picked up the hotel phone and ordered the most expensive champagne they had in stock. Crystal flutes clinked against the mahogany nightstand as I celebrated alone. They wanted me to feel lonely, discarded. Instead, I felt free. Leaning back on the bed, I remembered something: family doesn't only betray you in a single dramatic blow. It's death by 1,000 cuts. I think about Thanksgiving dinners where my voice never mattered. If I tried to tell a story about my work, about the company projects I had poured myself into, someone would interrupt, usually my brother, with something louder, shinier, emptier. They clapped for him. My words dissolved into the wallpaper. I remember being 14, standing in front of the mirror, wearing a pale dress I had painstakingly sewn by hand for the school dance. My mother's only comment, "Stand straighter, you look slouched." No one asked if I liked the dress. No one cared that I stayed up for 3 nights to perfect every seam. And as an adult? Birthdays passed with generic texts, thinly veiled afterthoughts tossed into the group chat hours late. But when it came to borrowing money, suddenly I became visible. I was useful. My quiet reliability meant I would never say no, and they knew it. That's the thing about family like mine. They know how to weaponize your goodness, your silence, and then act shocked when the silence sharpens into steel. After the first champagne glass, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened my notebook. Not the work one filled with schedules and invoices, but the private one, the book that held all the unsent letters, all the lines of thoughts I never dared share aloud. My handwriting stared back at me like an old friend. And in those pages, I began to sketch my plan. Revenge would not be loud, messy, or obvious. That would be too easy. No, the kind of justice I wanted had to be clean. Precise. The kind that left no room for negotiation or denial. After all, they thrived on rewriting history, convincing themselves, and me, that things weren't as bad as they were. If I shouted, they would call me dramatic. If I wept, they'd smirk about my weakness. But numbers? Paperwork? Contracts? Bank accounts? Those don't lie. They bruise in silence, break in ways no apology can patch. And oh, how my family loved to pretend they were self-made while living on my shadow contributions. That was my entry point. The next morning, I walked down to the lobby, calm, collected, well-rested. The concierge greeted me warmly, because unlike my family, I tipped well, treated staff like actual human beings. While sipping black coffee, I logged into my accounts. Every shared expense was neatly laid out, their names tied to cards only I could trace. By nightfall, letters were drafted and scheduled, credit notifications, overdue warnings, account freezes, each one designed not to hit them all at once, but to trickle into their lives like whispers of their own undoing. They had abandoned me? Fine. Let them walk home only to find the ground beneath their houses trembling. Weeks, not days. That's how long this would unfold. Because nothing tastes sweeter than slow burn justice. My brother, James, was always the golden boy. Quarterback in high school, though he broke his arm midway. Didn't matter. They still told the story like he was destined for the NFL. When his startup failed, after draining tens of thousands from my parents and, yes, from me, it was chalked up to bad luck. Not poor planning. Not arrogance. Just unlucky timing. Guess who bailed him out quietly? Me, the invisible sister with a stable job, a savings account, a spine hunched under silence. My sister, Lily, wasn't cruel outright. She was worse, subtle. She specialized in compliments that carry knives. "Oh, that's such a brave outfit for you. You're so independent, I could never survive without constant help." She would say it with a smile, the kind that drew everyone else in, leaving me to nurse invisible wounds. And my parents? Their betrayal was quieter. Not yelling or violence, but something slicker, choosing never to notice. Choosing to lift others while leaving me on the ground. Love measured in who looked brighter on paper. They weren't villains in the cinematic sense. They were ordinary. Which made their cruelty so much worse, no one would ever believe me. Until now. That week in the hotel, I stayed for 3 days past my booking. Why rush back to reality when reality was already at my feet, begging to be rewritten? I walked the streets of Chicago, bought myself dinners alone, went to museums where silent paintings understood me better than my entire bloodline. For the first time in years, I began to like being seen, by strangers, not family. By people who smiled without hidden daggers behind their teeth. Still, each night, I returned to my notebook. Drafting, refining, sharpening. I didn't just want them to lose money. I wanted them to feel, truly feel, the absence of the woman they thought was a doormat. To know what it was like to sit in a figurative hotel room with no one coming back for them. They abandoned me physically. I would abandon them financially, emotionally, structurally. By the time I packed my own bags, I wasn't just leaving a hotel. I was leaving my role behind. No longer the quiet provider, no longer invisible. The power had shifted, and they didn't even know it yet. 3 weeks later, I heard the first crack in their world. James called me, not out of concern, not even about the hotel incident, but fumbling, erratic. His car had been repossessed. Apparently, the loan he thought was guaranteed had been quietly redirected, the collateral tied to his name frozen. He was livid, panicked, the golden boy gasping for air. I listened. Silently. Calmly. Then I hung up. 5 minutes later, I opened my notebook again, flipped to the next page. This was only the beginning. James's frantic phone call should have satisfied me more than it did. For so many years, I dreamed, silently, secretly, of watching the pedestal crumble beneath him. And now it was happening. But instead of raw satisfaction, I felt something sharper, colder. It wasn't enough. One toppled domino didn't make the tower fall. I knew my revenge would take patience. Like feeding poison that works not in hours, but in weeks. Not long after James's breakdown, Lily began her descent. Unlike James, who burned through opportunities loudly, Lily thrived on optics. Her face was her brand. She had a modest influencer following, nothing dramatic, but enough for local sponsorships and brand freebies. Clothes, skin products, discounts, all of it built on carefully constructed perfection. What she didn't know was that several of her free trials and partnership deals were tied directly to contracts I had co-signed years back when she begged me for help with the boring parts of her rise. "You're so good with paperwork," she'd said sweetly, sliding forms and agreements across the table while I sat there with my lukewarm coffee. She never thanked me. So, I simply contacted the right people. Documents misfiled. Renewals denied. Credit flagged. Slowly, brands began stepping away from her. At first, she pretended it was choice, curating her feed with captions about needing a break from the toxic beauty industry. But even curated cracks are still cracks. And when the contracts dried up, so did the attention. Her calls to me were less frantic than James's, but laced with subtle panic. "Have you noticed brands shifting lately? It's like no one wants fresh faces anymore." She chuckled hollowly, waiting for my reassurance. I gave her nothing. Let her drown in the silence she had left for me my entire life. Ironically, the hardest ones for me to strike were our parents. Not because they were innocent, far from it, but because their cruelty masked itself in negligence, not direct theft. Sabotaging James was easy. Pulling away Lily's spotlight was satisfying. But my parents? They had built their whole mythology on stability. The hardworking Midwestern couple who raised 3 kids, making sacrifices for us all, always eager to tell neighbors just how proud they were. Except their pride only stretched toward the shining stars, James the businessman, Lily the beauty queen. Me? I was the scaffolding no one notices. So I began with the thing they prized most, image. The family house, the one they clung to as a monument of middle-class achievement, was mortgaged years back when James insisted on launching yet another failing enterprise. I had co-signed, of course, because who else was responsible enough to hold that burden? One quiet email, one quiet withdrawal of my continued extensions, and suddenly their mortgage was called into question. Not foreclosure yet, that was too harsh, too sudden. No, I wanted a fissure. A hint of instability rising like mold through their beloved white picket walls. Letters stamped urgent. Phone calls with unfamiliar accents chasing them for money. Neighbors beginning to notice weeds growing in the immaculate lawn. I could almost see my mother clutching her pearls, whispering to her bridge club, pretending nothing was wrong. My father doubling down, barking at bank representatives while unaware that the real enemy was the daughter who had once folded her dreams into silence at their dinner table. The beauty of it, the poetry, was that I didn't need to confront them. No angry phone calls, no dramatic showdowns. I was a ghost in their collapse. They had abandoned me in a hotel room, confident in my invisibility. Now, they were being haunted by the daughter they couldn't see. And I discovered something addictive about that power. Not just the revenge itself, but the invisibility turned weapon. They couldn't fight me because they didn't even realize I was fighting back. For years I had begged, silently, with every unspoken cry, to be noticed. Now I prayed for their blindness. Because in their blindness, I thrived. The hotel abandonment wasn't the first time they left me behind. I remember being 12, on a family road trip to the Grand Canyon. Bright skies, red rocks stretching for miles. We stopped at a convenience store, and while I wandered in awe over colorful postcards, sunsets printed against deep canyons, they drove off without me. It took 30 minutes for them to come back, but the memory carved itself into me like stone. My mother's airy explanation, "We thought you were in the back seat with your sister." My father shifted uncomfortably, muttering about being tired from driving. My siblings laughed. Laughed at the idea that I had been left behind like luggage. I told myself I forgave them. That's what children do. They bend their pain into little origami shapes until it's small enough to tuck away. But now, 34 and sitting with the power of adulthood in my hands, I unfolded it back to its full size. They had left me behind before. And this time, I would leave them behind for good. The second phone call from James was different. Gone was the cockiness. He was unraveling. His voice cracked as he confessed his car repossession was only the beginning. His credit cards were suspended. Loan offices were hounding him. Investors, if you could even call them that, refused callbacks. "Please, sis," he begged. For the first time in my life, the golden boy, the center of every family gathering, was asking me for help. I let the silence stretch. I could hear his breath hitching on the other line. He thought I would cave, that my habitual softness would resurface. That's the role I had always played. But I wasn't her anymore. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm. "James, maybe this will be your chance to finally figure things out on your own." And then I hung up. That night, staring at my ceiling, I realized something almost terrifying. I wasn't doing this just for vengeance anymore. I was doing it because the balance finally felt right. For decades, I was the family's quiet lender, giver, the unnoticed backbone. Now, slowly, I was pulling out that support beam. Watching the structure groan and falter. It wasn't destruction for destruction's sake, it was justice. They thought I was nothing. Now, without me, they were less than nothing. 2 months in, Lily's decline became visible, even to her wide-eyed followers. She tried joking about her social media cleanse, but the desperation seeped through. Fewer brands sent her free gifts. Her makeup tutorials shifted from glossy confidence to jittery defensiveness. Comments began piling up. "Are you okay? You seem off lately. Wow, you've aged so suddenly." Nothing wounds like public pity. And the sweetest part? She had no idea I was behind it. Each loss looked like bad luck, like change, like the natural decline of trends. But I knew it was me tightening the faucet she thought flowed endlessly. The letter I had been waiting for arrived at their doorstep. Mortgage repayment due. No extensions. No exceptions. I didn't need to be there to picture it, my mother's trembling hand as she scanned the notice, my father's bluster cracking under pressure. For once, they had no child to brag about. James was spiraling. Lily was fading. And me? I was the ghost pressing the knife deeper in, not out of malice, but out of necessity. Because wasn't it poetic, after all, that the daughter they had forgotten would be the one to make them remember? I lay in bed that night, notebook open, pen hovering over the next blank page. What would come next? Ruin was already blooming across their lives like weeds. But weeds could always thicken, roots could always run deeper. And I wasn't finished. Not yet. The silence of the hotel room had birthed something in me, something I no longer feared. Something they should. By the time autumn carved its gold across the trees outside my apartment window, the cracks in my family's perfect facade had widened into canyons. James avoided social media entirely, his cocky posts about success replaced with silence. Lily's followers dwindled, and the once flowing stream of admiration turned into a trickle of pity. My parents' frantic grip on their home became more obvious with each whispered phone call and late-night pacing I imagined them doing in their once pristine kitchen. I should have stopped there. Any reasonable woman would have. But reason had rarely served me in that family. Reason had told me to obey, to forgive, to stand in the shadows meekly while they basked in the limelight. No, stopping wasn't an option anymore. I found myself haunted by memories of every insult, every careless dismissal. And with each memory, came an idea. Take the family photographs, for instance. My mother had always insisted on glossy prints lining the hallway, from James's football glories to Lily's pageant smiles. My face was there too, trapped in corners, squished between bodies as if I were an afterthought. So I hired someone. An anonymous someone online, discreet, brilliant with digital tools. Within weeks, replacements arrived at my parents' neighbors' doorsteps, copies of those family photos, but with subtle changes. Sometimes, James was missing from group shots. Sometimes Lily's face was blurred just enough to look like a printing error. The neighbors guessed printing mistakes, maybe aging frames. They wouldn't know the truth. But my parents? They would. Because they prided themselves on perfection. And perfection crumbled fastest under small distortions. The next time anyone visited their house, those eerie, altered photos staring from the walls would whisper the story that maybe, just maybe, their golden children weren't as untouchable as they believed. Despite my vow to remain invisible, I couldn't resist one act of open defiance. No dramatics, no screaming confrontation, just a surgical strike. It happened on a Sunday. My parents' church service. Their sacred ritual of appearances. I slipped into the back pew, unnoticed at first. They stood in the front, my mother's hat tilted just so, my father straightening his aging suit. James sat 2 rows ahead, shoulders slumped. Lily was beside him, face drawn and thinner than I remembered. I watched them. Observed them like specimens. And for once, they didn't radiate superiority. They radiated exhaustion. When the sermon ended, I left before they could see me. But not before I did one thing, slipped an envelope into the church's offering plate. No money inside, just a note. You left me once. I will never leave you. A daughter. I smiled as I walked out into the crisp air, imagining the shiver climbing up their spines when they found it. The third call from my brother came at night, the sort of hour when panic eats at pride. His voice was raw, unshielded. "I can't do this anymore, sis," he whispered. "They're everywhere. The banks, the collectors. Every investment, gone. I don't even have money for rent this month. You've always been the steady one, the one who helped. Please, help me." I closed my eyes, picturing all the years I'd sat across from him at family dinners, listening to his smug stories while he ignored my existence. For once, the steadiness he begged for was gone. "You'll survive," I said, my tone colder than ice. "You've always thought you were invincible. Now prove it." His breathing cracked on the other end, a stifled sob. I hung up. I won't lie, my hand trembled afterward. But with that tremor came another feeling, one I couldn't untangle, justice braided with guilt, pain woven with exhilaration. Because while ruining him hurt, watching him fall felt devastatingly right. The final straw for Lily came not from money, but humiliation. One evening, scrolling idly through social media, I saw it, a viral video of her live stream meltdown. Her ring light had cast a harsh glow over her pale face. She was rambling incoherently about brands abandoning her, accusing followers of betrayal, sobbing about dark forces trying to destroy her. The comments were merciless. "She's lost it. Someone check on this girl. Wow, beauty fades fast." It was everything she feared most, being seen as fragile, slipping, irrelevant. And me? I sat there with my tea, watching, knowing I had gently tugged every thread that unraveled her. They called me next. My mother's voice, sharp but trembling, broke decades of indifference. "We know something's happening," she said tightly. "Everything's going wrong at once. James, Lily, now the house." And her pause cut me sharper than her words. "We think it's you." I didn't confirm. I didn't deny. Instead, I said softly, "Maybe it's just balance. Maybe the world noticed what you refused to." Her silence weighed heavy. For the first time in my life, I had left her speechless. Then my father tried. His booming voice, once unmovable, now stuttered. We gave you everything we could. Maybe not perfectly, but..." I cut him off. "You gave me nothing but shadows. And now, shadows are all you'll have." I ended the call, my heart hammering but steady in conviction. Sometimes late at night, doubt creeps in. What kind of daughter dismantles her own family? What kind of sister stands by while her siblings drown? And yet, the answer always comes back to me in silence. The kind of daughter who was never treated like one. The kind of sister who was always expected to hold the others afloat until she finally drowned. I didn't start this war. They did. The day they left me behind in the hotel, no, the day they left me behind as a child, forgotten at gas stations, ignored at tables, erased from every equation of love and worth. I am not cruel. I am not a villain. I am balance. Each member of my family was unraveling, but something still gnawed at me. Their downfall, while satisfying, wasn't complete. They could rebuild. They could crawl back to their limp reputations and salvage scraps of their pride. No, I wanted a final act. Something undeniable. So I looked toward the one thing they all clung to, even through the chaos, the family name. Every lie, every performance, every sacrifice I had made, all built on keeping that name polished for the outside world. That's what I would shatter next. The world would see the truth. That behind our perfect veneer was abandonment, cruelty, indifference. That behind every smiling photograph was a daughter left to rot. And when the family name collapsed, nothing would remain. I closed my notebook, slid it into the drawer, and whispered to myself. They left me alone once. Now, I will leave them alone forever. But this time, it wouldn't be invisibility. It would be erasure. The funny thing about reputation is how easily it can be lit like kindling. For years, my family fed on theirs as though it were bread and wine, our last name was their altar, and they worshipped it faithfully. So I decided that, if balance was the theme of my revenge, their name would be the final sacrifice. Every family has closets rattling with bones. Mine was no exception. James had debts to loan sharks he forgot to mention to my parents. I knew, because once upon a time, he begged me to help pay one off before his reputation suffered. I paid, silently, and kept the receipt. Lily had a history of fake sponsorship deals. Brands stopped working with her before, but not because of trends, because she overpromised, sent doctored analytics, lied to companies about her follower counts. I knew because she had sent me spreadsheets once, begging me to pretty them up for presentations. And my parents, their secrets were older, dustier, but potent. My father took money from my grandmother's estate that was supposed to be divided among us 3 children. My mother encouraged him, assuring me, at the time, you don't need it, you're sensible. Your siblings will make better use of it. I signed documents blindly, too naive to know better. They had always been confident that my silence was eternal, that I would never dare open my mouth. I didn't need to start rumors. Rumors rot too quickly. I wanted facts that smelled of truth, things that couldn't be shrugged off as envy or bitterness. So I became careful, methodical. I sent James's unpaid receipts and loan records, complete with his panicked signatures and failed repayment schedules, to a journalist known for sniffing out fraudulent entrepreneurs. I forwarded Lily's doctored spreadsheets anonymously to a handful of brands she still courted, attaching screenshots of her contradictory emails. It didn't matter if the evidence was years old, the whiff of dishonesty was enough to sour contracts forever. For my parents, the strategy was simpler. I contacted an old relative, the one person in the extended family still bitter about my grandmother's estate. I gave her exactly the documents she needed to reignite her years-old fight over stolen inheritance. Watching my parents dragged, unwillingly, into public legal squabbles over their alleged fraud was an agony they had never anticipated. Like dominoes, each blow fell neatly into place. It took only months for the consequences to twist their lives into knots. James was outed on a local business blog as a pretender of entrepreneurship, with debts so heavy the article ended by questioning whether prison time was around the corner. Lily's sponsors, already cautious, pulled out completely. The gossip spiraled fast. Once someone is accused of faking data, they're branded as a fraud forever. Her brand collapsed. Her dwindling followers sniffed blood and turned on her, calling her desperate, exposed. And my parents, oh, the humiliation they must have felt, their names dragged through probate court, whispered about by extended family who had once envied their success. They weren't victims anymore. Now, they were hypocrites who had stolen from their own bloodline. The family name, once so vibrant in their mouths, became ash. The final call came one night. I almost didn't answer. It was my mother. Her voice was quieter than I had ever heard. Not sharp, not commanding, just small. "Why are you doing this to us?" she asked faintly. I laughed before I could stop myself. Why? Because you left me behind 1,000 times. Because you built a world where I didn't matter unless you needed saving. Because every smile came at my expense. That hotel night was just the last straw. There was silence. Heavy. And then my father's voice, distant in the background, weak where it had once thundered, "We didn't know. We didn't understand." The words that should have come 30 years ago. Now worthless. "It's too late," I said simply, and hung up. Some nights, I wonder if I've turned into exactly what they always accused me of being: cold, strange, unlikable. But then I remember the truth: cruelty made me. Their dismissal raised me. Their laughter, their erasure, their abandonment sharpened every edge of who I am. I am not destroying for fun. I am not burning for warmth. I am holding up a mirror. And they cannot stand the reflection staring back. Of course, no one died. But in many ways, what I witnessed next felt like a funeral. The family stopped speaking to each other. James blamed my parents for raising him spoiled. Lily lashed out at James, accusing him of pulling everyone down. My parents, cornered by lawsuits, blamed Lily for tarnishing the name. They couldn't look at each other without venom, and without me lifting another finger, the structure collapsed. Our once united, arrogant clan was now fractured beyond repair. And I remained apart, watching their empire fall from the comfort of my quiet apartment. One night, 6 months after the night they left me alone, I went back to Chicago. Back to the very hotel room where my revenge fire had first been lit. I booked the same suite. The same balcony view of city lights. Sat alone with a glass of champagne, remembering the silence that birthed me. They thought I would crumble in that silence. Instead, I became whole in it. Now, years of their neglect had found their conclusion, not with explosions, but with erosion. They had drowned not because I pushed them into the water, but because I finally stopped pulling them to shore. They left me alone, but they didn't realize. I was the one holding everything up. And the day I let go was the day they fell. The silence, in the end, was the thing that stayed with me. Not their screams, not their begging voices, not even the panicked phone calls that used to rattle my nights. No, it was the silence that followed their collapse. The way their once loud family group chat went dark. The way holidays, once cluttered with their bragging and posturing, passed like ordinary days. For the first time in my life, there was no noise pressing against me. And in that silence, I felt both peace and something else, a shadow of doubt curling along the edges. People think revenge is fire, hot and relentless, roaring until there's nothing left. But I've learned a different truth: revenge is ice. It creeps, it freezes, it slows your pulse until you're not sure if you're alive or merely suspended. When James stopped calling, when Lily deleted her accounts, when my parents sold the house they once called untouchable, I won. I know I won. I watched the family name splinter and fall like glass. But sometimes, I wake in the middle of the night and think, if I cut them down, what does that make me? Was I the quiet victim all along, or did I become the very cruelty they planted in me? Then another thought, sharper, steadier, slides in: no. I did what they taught me to do. They showed me erasure, so I mastered it. Months later, curiosity drew me back to the neighborhood where it all began. The house no longer belonged to us. The yard, once trimmed within an inch of its life, sagged with weeds. The shutters were a fading blue. The porch squeaked under new footsteps that didn't belong to us. I stood on the sidewalk, watching strangers carry groceries into what was once my prison. My mother's roses were gone. My father's grill rested at the side, almost invisible in the tall grass. It looked like any other house now. Ordinary. Forgettable. And that was maybe the best punishment of all. For a family that had worshipped appearances, their temple was leveled into mediocrity. I felt no urge to cry. Only relief. It wasn't mine anymore, neither the house, nor the burdens, nor the ghosts within it. I didn't plan to see them again. But fate plays cruel games. It was at a grocery store in a different part of the city. I saw Lily first, near the frozen foods. No makeup. No cameras. Just her thin frame hunched over a discount section, scanning for coupons. For a split second, our eyes met. She froze, then turned quickly away, as though my gaze could annihilate her. Maybe it could. I didn't follow. I let her carry her cheap groceries to the register, dignity hanging from her like a torn coat. Later, I passed James on the street. His clothes were wrinkled, his once careless swagger replaced with a slump. He didn't recognize me. Or maybe he pretended not to. Either way, the man who once dominated every room now looked like any other tired face in the city, swallowed by the grind. My parents I never saw again. Last I heard, they moved into a smaller town, living privately, their social circle shattered, their neighbors whispering about lawsuits and shame. And me? I walked away every time, quietly. They had taught me invisibility. I let them live in the prison of mine. People ask sometimes if revenge brings happiness. I couldn't tell you. Happiness was never the point. What I found instead was clarity. Clarity that family is not always sacred. Clarity that bonds built on neglect are not bonds at all. Clarity that a person can burn quietly for decades and still rise from the ashes with precision. I don't celebrate what I did. But I don't regret it either. I gave them what they gave me, absence. They had left me 1,000 times in 1,000 invisible ways. I just left them in a way that could never be undone. Sometimes I wonder if everything truly started that night in Chicago, in that crisp sterile hotel room they abandoned me in, or if the fire had been burning long before. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed, waiting for someone to knock, someone to care, someone to say, "We're sorry, we didn't mean to." No one came. But what truly lit the spark wasn't the abandonment itself. It was the realization that they left me behind and didn't even consider what I carried. They forgot the quietest truth: I was the one who paid. I was the one who held everything together. And the day I stopped paying, the whole empire fell. I don't have a grand ending. There's no triumphant castle built from their ruins, no glamorous empire I forged out of vengeance. What I have now is peace. Small, simple peace. I go to museums. I write again. I sit at coffee shops without worrying about keeping the family afloat. I'm an invisible woman who has finally learned that invisibility isn't weakness, it's freedom. Every face I pass on the street is just a passerby. Every silence in my life is chosen, not imposed. And when I glance in the mirror, I don't see the forgotten daughter anymore. I see the woman who survived abandonment, who turned pain into power. They left me alone in a hotel once. But I stayed alone because at last, I decided that being alone on my terms was better than being surrounded on theirs. They thought erasing me would keep their world standing. But I was the foundation all along. And when I walked away, the house came down,